There's a city older than Egypt, but no one remembers its name. You arrive too late. The city is already gone. Its temples flattened by wind, its plazas swallowed by dust. No name greets you, no king claims the silence. Yet the ground hums faintly, as if remembering a heartbeat older than empire. You kneel, fingers tracing the pattern of stone and reed, and there it is. The pulse of Norte Chico, Caral-Supe. You don't know it yet, but you're standing in the oldest city of the Americas, built 5,000 years ago when the pyramids of Egypt were still young, and yet you've probably never heard of it. Maybe that's the real mystery. How the first city in the Americas disappeared from history books while younger empires stole the spotlight. It's not supposed to exist here, but it does, and it shouldn't. That's the mystery. You start from the ending, because this story only makes sense when you rewind it. Picture the desert coast of Peru. Barren, skeletal, shimmering with mirages. Today, there are only faint outlines of pyramids and the ghosts of plazas. But reverse time in your mind. Watch the dunes recede. Rivers swell. People gather. Seaweed baskets become walls. See dry fish and cotton weave an economy out of air. You can hear it now. The rhythm of flutes carved from pelican bones. The murmur of traders counting quipu knots. The rush of irrigation channels diverting river light into crops. And behind it all, you sense something impossible. Order without conquest. Design without ego. Belief without idols. This is not a civilization built on kings. It's built on consensus and rhythm. On engineering disguised as faith. You lean closer to one of those pyramids. Its walls are woven, not in stone blocks like Giza's, but in shikra bags, filled with rocks and tied by hand. Thousands of them. Each bag placed precisely, forming terraces that breathe with the earth's tremors. This isn't brute construction. It's structural empathy. These people understood that the desert moves, so they built structures that could move with it. You imagine the engineers of Caral, if that's what we can call them, standing barefoot on the sand, measuring the direction of the wind, the whisper of the river. Their tools were reeds and stars, their blueprints, rituals, their mathematics, music. It's here that engineering, belief and art dissolve into one another. The amphitheatre wasn't merely a stage, it was an acoustic instrument, calibrated to carry the sound of flutes across the plaza, perhaps even toward the stars. The pyramids weren't tombs, they were living devices designed to bind community to cosmos. You begin to see that Caral's architecture is not a monument to human dominance. It's a collaboration with the landscape, a kind of desert symphony. And yet, how? How does a civilization rise without warfare, without fortifications, without weaponry, yet still organize massive construction projects and far-reaching trade networks? How does Norte Chico predate pottery, yet master textile engineering and urban planning? Archaeologists don't have all the answers. You, standing in the ruins, become the investigator. Every layer of sediment is a clue. Every carbon-dated reed fragment is a testimony. You learn that the Supe Valley was a convergence point, multiple river valleys connected through ritual and trade. There were 20 urban centres, coordinated across 1,800 square kilometres. Someone, perhaps everyone, was counting something. The seasons, the harvests, the rhythms of tide and song, and perhaps belief was the binding code, the invisible algorithm holding it all together. Now you rewind further into the minds of the builders. They didn't separate engineering from belief. To them, a retaining wall was as sacred as a ritual drum. Both held rhythm, both sustained life. The circular plaza mirrored the sky. The river channels traced constellations. Art, math and prayer were languages of the same design. You can almost feel it under your feet, the hum of balance. Maybe that's why Norte Chico feels alien to modern logic. It doesn't fit our template of civilization as domination. It suggests something gentler, something engineered for harmony instead of power. And that's what unsettles you most. Because if Caral-Supe thrived without armies, kings, or written decrees, what does that say about us? About what we believe progress requires? The wind rises again, carrying the scent of the Pacific. You blink, and the ruins return to silence. The plazas crumble back into sand. Civilization rewound to dust. But the mystery lingers, doesn't it? You feel it pressing at the edge of reason. The idea that faith once built pyramids not to worship gods, but to sustain balance. That art once measured rivers. That belief once engineered survival. So here's your surprising fact. The oldest city in the Americas may have been the most peaceful. And here's your deeper question. What if the future of civilization depends on rediscovering what Caral already knew? That structure and spirit are one. You look once more across the valley, imagining the hands that wove this place into being, and feel an urge to follow the investigation deeper. If this mystery intrigues you, if you believe that the blueprints of the past still shape the pulse of tomorrow, stay curious, subscribe, and keep digging. So let's begin. You rewind the silence until it breaks. At first, it's only wind, thin, unformed, threading the valleys of the soup. Then comes rhythm, footsteps on sand, reed baskets rustling, a pulse in the earth that could be heartbeat or drum. You follow it upstream toward the confluence where dry desert surrenders to thin, stubborn rivers. The light there doesn't fall, it vibrates. You smell salt and smoke, hear laughter, weaving, murmurs in languages without writing. And somewhere above it all, a long, hollow note rises. A bone flute, cutting through the dawn. That's where Caral begins. Not as a city, but as a frequency. You're standing inside the sound that would become civilization. They don't call themselves engineers, priests or artists. They're all three, and neither. To you, they're shadows bending over reeds, drawing invisible lines across the dust. They listen before they build. Each gust of wind, each bend of the river, each tremor beneath their bare feet, these are the equations they solve. Their temple platforms rise slowly, almost reluctantly from the desert. Not stacked, but woven. Shikra bags, bundled reeds filled with stones, layered and bound, each one carrying the memory of a hand, the rhythm of a breath. You can't tell where labour ends and prayer begins. They're not erecting monuments, they're tuning instruments. Each terrace a note, each platform a chord in a symphony that only the landscape can hear. You catch yourself thinking, these aren't builders, they're composers in sand and fibre. The plaza, circular and open to the sky, is their amphitheatre. When the people gather, the architecture itself becomes an echo chamber for belief. Words vanish, sound becomes the message. The harmony between engineering and faith isn't symbolic, it's structural. Every curve, every wall, every hollow is calibrated to hold vibration, to make energy visible. You wonder, did they build the city to worship the gods, or to become them? You kneel beside an irrigation channel, simple, shallow, but so precise that even millennia later its geometry is intact. You can see the logic, the angle of descent, the division of flow, the patient redirection of a river's force into sustenance. This is engineering born not of conquest, but of care. Each channel is an act of faith. You sense it in the rhythm of their work, the belief that water, properly guided, is divine, that the river is both a tool and a deity. Nearby, cotton fields shimmer like pale ghosts. The threads spun from their fibres become nets, garments, and trade goods that stretch across valleys. Yet these same threads, when dyed and tied into intricate patterns, become artefacts of memory, precursors to quipu, the knot records that will later carry numbers and stories through time. You realise Caral's mathematics was tactile, counted not in ink but in touch. The code of civilization literally in their hands. The more you observe, the more belief and engineering entwine until they're indistinguishable. Each wall you touch hums with purpose. Part shelter, part shrine, part message. Each artifact is both tool and testament. It dawns on you that Norte Chico wasn't designed to dominate its environment. It was designed to translate it. Night falls over the valley. You see torches flare along the plazas. A procession begins, people moving in spirals, not lines. They carry baskets, flutes, offerings of anchovies and fruit, all lit by the trembling glow of flame. You follow, heart sinking with the drumbeat. The air thickens with smoke and song. Somewhere inside the main pyramid, a chamber breathes firelight. They call it a temple, but what you witness feels closer to an experiment. Sound reverberates in perfect loops. Chanting rises, colliding with the architecture, and suddenly you sense it. This place was built to amplify something beyond human scale. Faith here isn't decoration, it's an operating system. Every note, every spark, every vibration is data flowing through sacred geometry. The worshippers aren't pleading for miracles, they're synchronizing with the structure, with the desert itself. In Caral, belief is not passive, it's kinetic, measurable, engineered. You look again at the faces flickering in torchlight, calm, focused, joyful. Not the fear-driven submission of later theocracies, but something more collaborative, a pact between people and physics. You realise with quiet awe, they are testing reality the way we test equations. By day, you walk the plazas again, and the scope of their creation hits you. 6 pyramids rise along the river terraces, each one carefully aligned to the mountains, to solstice light, to the breath of the Pacific wind. Trade routes radiate outward, carrying dried fish to the highlands, fruit from the jungles, shells from distant shores. The network is alive. But beneath the commerce, a subtler exchange hums, the circulation of meaning. Ritual unites the valley's scattered communities. Music connects language to geometry. Architecture translates belief into order. From your vantage point, the entire civilization feels like a living organism. Its pyramids lungs, its plazas heart, its rivers veins. You watch a young artisan etch spirals into a gourd with a sharpened bone. The pattern resembles sound waves. Another woman dyes cotton with red clay, spinning threads that seem to mimic constellations. Even their art is functional, each curve an echo of the forces that sustain them. Caral is not merely built, it is tuned. And you? You're the outsider, the investigator tracing its frequencies, realizing with unease that the people here already understood something our own world keeps forgetting. That progress isn't the conquest of nature, but harmony with it. You begin to notice the cracks, not in the walls, but in the rhythm. The rivers grow unpredictable, seasons shift. The wind brings longer droughts, then floods. The people respond with adaptation, new channels, deeper reservoirs, more elaborate rituals. But each solution demands more labour, more coordination, more belief. The gatherings in the plazas grow larger, louder, more urgent. Priests chant longer, musicians play harder, as if to hold the balance by sound alone. You sense a quiet anxiety beneath the songs, a civilization aware that its harmony is fragile. You find yourself asking, what happens when belief falters, when the river no longer obeys? At its height, Caral-Supe glows like a constellation in the desert. Trade flows like blood. Music and fire keep the nights alive. Children learn to weave, elders watch the stars, builders raise new terraces that stretch closer to the sky. It is a triumph, but an uneasy one, because every act of creation here whispers the same warning. Equilibrium is not eternal. The same precision that keeps their world in tune can just as easily amplify chaos. One misaligned note, one broken ritual, one failed harvest, and the whole harmony trembles. You feel it in your bones as the drums fade, a faint dissonant echo that doesn't belong. Maybe it's wind through hollow reeds, maybe it's time itself, testing the strength of their design. You look once more at the pyramids glowing red in sunset, and they seem to breathe, not as monuments, but as lungs of an organism that knows its cycle will end. Caral-Supe has awakened. It has mastered balance through engineering, belief and art. But in doing so, it has built a world so delicately tuned that even perfection becomes peril. And as the last note fades across the valley, you understand. Every civilization begins as a miracle, and ends as a question. The air goes still, the light fractures, and beneath it all the hum continues, steady, secret, waiting for the next hand to listen. You feel it before you see it. A subtle discord, a tremor not of earth but of rhythm. The valley still breathes, but the inhale and exhale no longer align. Where once every sound fit the architecture of faith, now there's a restlessness. Too many hands building, too many voices chanting slightly out of time. The harmony that once defined Caral has become its own burden. The system that kept it alive begins to strain under its own perfection. You don't call it collapse yet, not even decline. You call it pressure. It starts as these things always do with success. The rivers obeyed, the terraces yielded abundance, and belief, engineered into the architecture, had proven itself true. Every pyramid was a promise fulfilled. Every ritual, an equation that balanced the world. But equilibrium invites ambition. You watch as new leaders rise, their authority not seized by conquest but accumulated through control of ritual. The priests who once listened to the earth now claim to speak for it. Their role, once humble translator between human and river, swells into something more absolute. They demand precision in worship as in irrigation. They measure purity the way they measure rainfall. They assign cosmic meaning to compliance. You see their dilemma clearly. They are trapped by their own system of order. When every structure is sacred, no one dares to alter the blueprint. You can almost hear the argument in the wind. What if the water changes course? What if the gods no longer listen? And from the temples an answer whispered like threat. Then we will sing louder. There is a night, still documented in carbon and ash, when the sound of music turned into warning. A group of musicians gathered on the upper plaza, their flutes carved from condor bones, their drums stretched tight with fish skin. They begin to play to mark the equinox, a ritual to balance day and night, water and sky. The air is dense with salt and smoke. The people gather, trusting sound to hold the world steady. But the wind changes direction. The notes warp. The resonance that once echoed perfectly between pyramid and plaza now collides, fracturing the song into discordant echoes. The musicians hesitate. One pauses mid-breath, and in that instant of silence you feel the valley shift. The harmony fails. A moment later the ground trembles. Not much, a brief sharp quake, but enough to send pebbles sliding from the shikra walls. The amphitheatre cracks, the torches sway, the people gasp. For them this is not coincidence, it's omen. You can almost see it through the dust, belief and physics collapsing into each other. A civilization that engineered faith suddenly witnessing the failure of both. It's a cinematic instant, a single, real event that archaeologists will later find evidence of. Fissures in walls, scorched layers of reed, disrupted strata in the plaza floor. A moment when the music of Caral literally broke. You stand there, listening to the echo fade into the desert, and you realise that the first true silence of Norte Chico wasn't the one left by time. It was this one, the silence that fell within its own heartbeat. What follows isn't war, it's dissonance. The people do not turn violent, they turn inward. Each valley begins to build its own version of the ritual, its own interpretation of the code. The unified rhythm that once guided the network becomes fragmented, like multiple songs played in the same key but out of sync. Some worship the river directly, others build higher platforms, believing elevation brings them closer to divine order. Still others abandon the plazas for smaller settlements, where survival outweighs ceremony. You walk among them, observing the subtle erosion not of stone but of shared belief. The pyramids still stand, the fires still burn, the hands still weave shikra bags by the thousands. But the intent has changed. Where once architecture channeled faith, now it preserves memory. Ritual as rehearsal for something already gone. They keep building because to stop would mean admitting the harmony was an illusion. And yet, even in that denial, you sense something profoundly human. Their refusal to surrender meaning. You find them still working. The builders, the dreamers who cannot stop. They begin to dig deeper irrigation channels, more intricate and desperate than ever before. They realign walls, reinforce terraces, add layer upon layer of shikra to counter the trembling ground. It's brilliant, almost reckless innovation. Faith expressed through design, denial through architecture. They don't know they are engineering their own exhaustion. Each new project demands more labour, more coordination, more faith. The once peaceful network begins to fracture under the weight of its own ingenuity. Trade slows as more people stay home to repair. Rituals multiply, each one promising to restore balance. You see offerings growing stranger, bundles of fruit and feathers buried in foundations, burnt shells arranged in spiral patterns, music played into empty plazas as if trying to resurrect a vanished frequency. This is not superstition. It's grief disguised as geometry. And as you walk among the ruins of their determination, you realise how close brilliance stands to collapse, how the very precision that sustained Caral now becomes the source of its undoing. Then comes the flood, a real one, its traces still preserved in layers of silt and broken adobe. The Supe River swells beyond its channels, tearing through fields and terraces. The water, once tamed by careful design, now becomes wild, erasing boundaries. The Shikra walls, flexible but finite, buckle under the weight. Pyramids bleed stones. From the high platform you watch people wade through waist-deep currents, clutching baskets, flutes, children. The air fills with the sound of rushing water and panicked chants. They try to rebuild immediately, because that's what Caral teaches. Repair, rebalance, restore. But the river has rewritten the landscape. The equations no longer hold. The architects are silent. The priests chant louder. You can hear it, the desperation in their synchronized voices. The gods will listen. They must. But the sound no longer carries the way it used to. The amphitheatre, cracked and flooded, absorbs the song and gives back only echoes. Time compresses now. Decades blur. The plazas grow quiet. The once bright rhythm fades to pulse, then to echo. You see families packing tools following the river inland toward the next valley. The pyramids remain behind, still massive, still breathing faintly through the sand, but abandoned to the wind. They don't fall, they simply stop meaning. There's no war, no conquest, no single moment of destruction. Just the long, gentle unspooling of belief, the gradual silence after the final note. You stay long enough to feel the shift, where once faith engineered structure, now structure outlives faith. The city becomes an empty instrument, still capable of resonance, but with no one left to play it. Standing there, you finally understand. Caral-Supe's downfall wasn't failure, it was consequence. It collapsed not from greed or violence, but from devotion carried too far. A civilization that built harmony so exact that it couldn't bear imperfection. A song so perfectly tuned that the first wrong note unravelled the entire score. You close your eyes and listen. The desert is utterly still. Then, faintly, a whisper, wind through a cracked reed, mimicking the old flutes. The sound is haunting, tender, almost kind. It doesn't accuse, it reminds. You feel an ache you can't name. Empathy, not pity. Because they didn't vanish. They transformed. Their knowledge flowed into later hands, carried by travellers, echoed in textiles, mirrored in Andean terraces millennia later. Even now their design lingers in the DNA of every builder who tries to balance structure and spirit. But Caral-Supe itself sleeps, its heartbeat reduced to memory, its music encoded in stone. The mystery isn't why it fell. The mystery is how it ever stood at all. And as you walk away, sand soft beneath your feet, you carry that silence with you. The silence of a civilization that dreamed harmony so deeply it forgot how to live in dissonance. A quiet loss, a perfect ruin, a lesson buried in the rhythm of wind and reed. You think it's over. This story of dust and wind, but Caral never ended. It only changed frequency. The hum you heard in the ruins didn't die. It diffused, threading itself through centuries, through hands and voices that never forgot the rhythm of balance. You can still trace it if you listen carefully. It's in the way the Andes breathe with terraces that catch the light like prayer, in the quipu knots of the Inca that whisper data in fibre, in every Andean flute whose tone still bends like desert wind through bone. Caral-Supe never collapsed. It resonated outward. You find its fingerprints in geometry. The same circular plazas appear in later Andean temples. The same sacred alignments to solstice light persist in Machu Picchu's windows. Each new culture adds its own verse to a melody first composed here. The materials evolved, stone replaced reed, empire replaced village. But the equation remained constant. Structure as faith. Faith as function. You realise that every Andean civilization inherited Caral's original algorithm. The belief that architecture could be a language between human and cosmos. The Incas simply refined the grammar. Even the modern engineers, surveyors with drones and laser scanners, speak of Caral's proportions with the same quiet awe. They call it efficient, seismic resistant, sustainable. Words that, in truth, mean faithful. You start noticing smaller echoes too, the ones that slip into daily life unnoticed. A farmer in the Supe Valley still plants according to moonlight speaking to the river before diverting it. A grandmother ties coloured threads to a baby's wrist. Not decoration, but coded blessing. A street vendor arranges oranges in spirals on her cart without knowing she's reenacting a 5,000-year-old pattern. Even city planners in Lima, though they'd never admit it, repeat Caral's logic. Plazas at the centre, buildings around the heart, roads flowing like water. The shapes persist because they work, because they belong to the landscape's rhythm. Faith becomes habit, habit becomes heritage. You visit a Peruvian artist's studio overlooking the Pacific. On the wall hangs a canvas of sand and light, circles within circles, soft as breathing. He calls it Caral resonance. You ask him what inspired it, and he shrugs, smiling. I went there once. Couldn't forget the silence. It felt like standing inside an instrument. He plays you a sound file, digital, synthesized from field recordings taken among the pyramids. The hum is low, hypnotic. Then, layered beneath, he adds the flute tones from those ancient pelican bones, reimagined through speakers and reverb. You can't help it. You laugh softly. The world's first civilization is now a remix track, but the humour isn't mockery, it's connection. Humans are still trying to tune themselves to the same frequency, still experimenting with sound, form and faith to make sense of the invisible. It's absurd and beautiful at once. We build megacities powered by algorithms, yet still crave the same balance the Caral engineers sought with reeds and prayer. You think of the internet now, our own vast network of signals, our quipu made of code. Each post, each ping, each transmission, a modern ritual of connectivity. The same impulse, only faster, louder, less aware of itself. You imagine telling a Caral priest about Wi-Fi, and you can almost hear his gentle amusement. You've built a web of invisible energy across the sky. So did we. You laugh again, because he's right. Our towers hum with signals just as their pyramids hummed with wind. We chase transcendence through technology the way they did through music and sand. The mystery doesn't disappear, it updates its interface. You stand once more at the ruins, centuries collapsed into a single afternoon. The wind is still the same. The pyramids glow amber in the setting sun. A group of students nearby launch a drone over the site, its buzzing mixing with the sound of their laughter. One girl points out the amphitheatre's perfect symmetry through her tablet screen. Another hums a note, testing the echo. It bounces back, softer but intact. You realise you're witnessing continuity, the ancient and the modern speaking across time, through curiosity instead of conquest. Caral's real survival was never its walls. It was the impulse to listen, to measure the invisible. That impulse endures every time someone turns chaos into pattern, sound into structure, faith into form. It endures in art, in science, in the ordinary geometry of care. As night falls, the desert cools and the first stars appear. They look exactly as they did 5 millennia ago, because the cosmos doesn't forget either. You lie on the sand and trace the same constellations the builders once charted for guidance. Above you, the Milky Way arcs like a river of light, its reflection caught faintly in the winding Supe below. Two currents, celestial and earthly, still in conversation. And in that symmetry you feel the quiet genius of Caral-Supe. Not that it invented civilization, but that it tried to make civilization listen. Even now, in a world of satellites and skyscrapers, that lesson hums beneath the static. Progress without balance is only noise. The desert wind picks up again, brushing across the ruins, whistling through the gaps where reeds once were. For an instant you could swear it forms a note, a low, resonant tone, almost human. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's memory. Either way you smile, because the song never really stopped. The hum continues, across cities and centuries, across art, belief and code. A single vibration threading all our designs together, and as the stars flicker over Caral's silent pyramids, you hear it one last time, the sound of civilization remembering itself. You exhale. The desert exhales with you. The wind that once carried songs through reed pyramids now brushes your sleeve, as if to say, "You've heard enough. The rest is listening." The valley is quiet, but not empty. Every silence here is layered. Dust, memory, and the faint pulse of human intention. You realise the story you followed isn't just about how Caral rose and fell. It's about how it learned to breathe between chaos and order, faith and reason, something we still haven't mastered. You smile at the irony. 5,000 years later, we call our buildings smart, our systems intelligent, our networks alive. Yet Caral's architects might have found our buzzwords quaint. They already built intelligence into the landscape, humility into design, grace into structure. They engineered not to control nature but to listen to it. And maybe that's the first truth that survives them. Engineering fails when it forgets to listen. The second comes softer, like sand slipping through your fingers. Belief endures not through monuments, but through the act of making meaning, again and again, with our hands, our tools, our art. You think of our own rituals, scrolling, posting, coding, searching for pattern in the noise, and realise we're not so different from those early builders. We still build to understand ourselves. We still measure the world in rhythms we barely comprehend. Somewhere between our satellites and their stars, between our algorithms and their flutes, we share the same heartbeat. The human need to turn chaos into chorus. The sun dips low, staining the pyramids gold. The drone of the wind deepens until it almost becomes a note again. You stand there, half investigator, half pilgrim, watching the desert breathe in time with the sea. You whisper, not to anyone in particular, they built harmony, and we're still trying to hear it. The wind takes the words, scatters them across the valley, and for a moment it feels like the earth answers, soft, amused, eternal. And that's when it hits you. The closing truth Caral has waited millennia to offer. All civilizations are just echoes, learning the same song at different volumes,